What is the #1 cheater in the world currently playing at Pokemon regional events? Well, we're going to be covering that particular deck along with the other top 9 and top 10 in general best meta Pokemon card decks for the month of September 2024. We're going to be covering the Stellar Crown list coming up later this week, probably tomorrow. Let's have some fun and talk about Pokemon cards. Coming in at number 10, we got my favorite deck, Miraidon EX, and I am excited for the upgrades this deck is going to get in the Stellar Crown format. But for now, let's talk about why it's at number 10. Baltimore Miraidon did not pop off. We got Tony Herrera, who plays 73rd out of like 2,300 players. It's looking like your pretty typical standard Miraidon list. We got 2 Squawk abilities, which is quite notable. We also do not have a single copies of Professor's Research in here. Instead, Tony opted for the Iono, which is a common card you can swap in and out. I really like the Iono in this list because sometimes you just really need that late game disruption against particular decks like Raging Bolt and pretty much any deck. If you can Iono them to 1 to 2 cards at the very end of the game, it's going to be a way you can slow them down and kind of steal a full turn off of them. One thing that's also funny between Jesse Parker and Tony's list is Jesse Parker has Research in his list, but he doesn't play Super Rod, and typically I'd play Super Rod in the deck if I do play the Research, but Tony has the Super Rod in the deck anyway, even without the Research. I've also just been a pretty big fan of Super Rod in Miraidon because it does allow you to hit your electric generators more consistently later on to the game, filling your deck with 3 more lightning energies. Man, I miss Flappy. Now, although Miraidon is number 10 on this list, don't let it fool you. I think it's going to do really well in the Stellar Crown format. The new Stadium card that lets you extend your bench if you have a Terra Pokemon on it. And of course, we've been sleeping on Mewtwo EX for our Miraidon deck for quite some time because it's unplayable until the Stadium came out. My opinion on the Miraidon list going forward is we're going to become basically a Raikou V deck. We're going to be a deck centered around Raikou V, not so much Iron Hands. I know a lot of people enjoyed Ampia very much, but I think the consistency that having the Raikou V being the main selling point of the deck is really strong. It's a very strong basic attacker that's very easy to set up. It's a Seal Stone target as well, and you can just start swinging into whatever you want. It feels really good. I'm going to be giving you guys my updated Miraidon list, my personal list. I've been crafting it for a couple of weeks now, and I did not want to post a half-cooked list. I wanted to give you guys the best list I could cook up for you guys. So if you want to stay in the know for my Miraidon list, which I'll probably play at the Louisville Regionals, make sure you guys hit that like button down below. Number 9 deck is Snorlax Stall. Now there are 2 different variations we're going to cover in this video. First one we're going to cover is your more typical Snorlax Stall without the Pidgeot EX, and then we're going to cover the one with Pidgeot, which is the Snorlax Stall variant that did better at the Baltimore Regionals. Here's a look at all of the players that played Snorlax Stall into day 2 of the Baltimore Regionals. There was a lot of them, and it makes sense because Charizard was a very popular pick as well, and Snorlax has a very fun time into Charizard. So I love cheering on Snorlax players because it makes my life easier as a Miraidon player, because I'd rather deal with a Snorlax player than deal with a Charizard player most of the time. You gotta pick your poison, and if I can see Charizard players feel a little tormented, I'm all for it. Here's a look at the typical kind of Snorlax list you can play without running the Pidgeot EX engine. The goal of this deck is to not really take prizes, but if it comes down to it, you can use the Blood Moon Ursaluna EX to start swinging and start taking some prizes, which is, it's at least nice to see Snorlax trying to take a prize or 2 every now and then. Now I should mention right now, we're not going to cover the nitty gritty, like the how to play all these decks in this particular video, but if you stay tuned with me for the best decks for October, we're going to be covering a more breakdown guide of how all these decks operate. So if you're a newer player to the game, this like list video might not be necessarily suited for you if you're trying to learn how to pick up a deck, but come October, I got you covered. Next up, we have the Snorlax Stall Pidgeot EX variant. This was played by Jeremy Gibson, who got 10th place at the Baltimore Regionals, and Liam Halliburton, who got 35th as well. I believe Liam won Orlando Regionals, and yeah, both of these players are just very strong, so I'd assume they just make day 2 regardless of the deck they chose, but they decided to go for the meta call of Snorlax Pidgeot. The big thing for this format we're playing in, this whole circuit, is that you have to go with a record of 7 wins and 2 losses, or I believe 5 wins and 4 ties to make it into day 2. You need 21 match points, and so the regular kind of Snorlax that you see, that's a very tie-prone kind of deck, and with this version of Snorlax, you have attackers characters like Blood Moon Ursaluna and Luxray V. And so basically you whittle down your opponent's resources non-stop all game, and then you just bring up Blood Moon Ursaluna and you're like, here's the final boss, deal with it, and good luck, because you've probably used up so many of your important resources earlier into the game. 8 is a deck that saw a lot of hype leading into the Baltimore Regionals for about a week or two. We got Ancient Box. So here's a list that Andrew Kennett played, another top player in the game. Andrew was the highest placing Ancient Box player at the Baltimore Regionals. Now, I really like his version of Ancient Box. It isn't as linear as the past versions of Ancient Box I'm sure you guys have seen in the past. So let's really dial into this list and show you guys some of the cool cards that Andrew included for his list. First, we don't only have the only dark energies in this list. He has a spread of 2 fighting and 6 dark, along with a unique line of attackers. We got 4 copies of Roaring Moon, 4 copies of Great Tusk, the one that can mill, but also can one-shot, you know, big Pokemon like Miraidon and Iron Thorns for like weakness. We also have Koraidon in here as well as an optional attacker if you're able to set up a larger board state. And then you also have Cornerstone Ogrepon EX in here too, which is just a really strong card that synergizes with this deck very well. This isn't the only time we're gonna see this fighting type Cornerstone Mask Ogrepon in the top 10. This Ogrepon Pokemon is very, very annoying. It's one of the control style Ogrepons because it doesn't take damage from your opponent's Pokemons that have abilities. So it's really going to be annoying for your opponents who aren't able to attack into it or play around it. It's a really good card into Charizard, and Charizard is typically one of the harder matchups for Ancient Box, so Andrew did tech accordingly, preparing for those Charizards. And he didn't just put 1, he put in 2 copies. He wanted to ensure that this card was going to see some play. And the attack that it just has in general is pretty good. It's like a shred attack for fighting and double colorless, so it's a pretty solid attack that you can pull off. The A-spec of choice for Ancient Box that I've been seeing a lot lately is the Secret Box. So it's kind of funny. You got Ancient Box deck, Secret Box is the A-spec. But yeah, this box card is just amazingly good for consistency. It's an A-spec that you can Pokestop into and just set up your board and play the game. You know, it's kind of important to play the game and set up. Coming in at number 7 is a Rogue deck that was concocted by, I believe, Cyrus Davis. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Cyrus Davis was the NAIC champion from a couple years ago, and they cooked up this list with a large testing group, I believe in like the New York Buffalo area, and they all played the same 60 and they popped off. So here's all the players that made day 2 with Cornerstone Control. Then more specifically, these are the 5 players that all ran the exact same 60 card list that also all made it into day 2, with the highest placement coming in from Nolan Randall. And I also recognize Dennis Peroff, our one of our locals, who also got second at the Vancouver Regionals most recently. And shout out to Bradley, congrats on locking in, I believe, your first day 2, and you got 42nd. That is huge. So you got some money out of this event too. I'm really proud of you, Bradley. To build a control deck, you really have to be very aware of the meta that you're running into, the meta that is currently going on, and you have to basically make really strong predictions, because when you build your control deck, you have to make it to be the most annoying possible thing for all these matchups you're expecting to hit. And you're hoping to hit a lot of the high up there meta decks. So you kind of want to like reverse engineer your list. And the list that was crafted up was, it was amazing. 4 copies of Cornerstone Mask Ogrepon right here, which has of course the ability to deny being attacked, which is really good. Not only that, but if your opponent does have a way to attack in the Cornerstone Mask Ogrepon, you can attack with the other Pokemon instead, Noivern EX. And Noivern EX is a nightmare for a lot of those beat stick basic decks like Roaring Moon, Miraidon, Raging Bolt. Basically, all Noivern needs is a double colorless energy. You attack with Covert Flight, and you basically auto win the game unless your opponent has a way to switch out your active and attack into the reset Noivern, or they actually have a way to attack into your Noivern. So a lot of these big basic decks aren't prepared for Noivern EX at all. And so players, you know, these players that played this version of Control were really able to take advantage of those matchups. You have really good cards in here like Penny to restrict your board so your opponent can't do things like Boss's Orders or future bundle you away. You got Chorus Tenacity in here as well, so you can get that town store out and set up your important tools and get that Artisan on the board as well, so you can set up the Noibats. Scoop up Cyclone as well in here, so you can just reset a damaged Pokemon, and that's a very easily searchable card with the help of Arvin. You got Energy Lotto in here as well to really dig for those double turbo energies. And I also should mention that you want to dig for those double turbo energies with Chorus's Tenacity. I think Chorus Tenacity is one of my favorite new supporters, like from the last couple of sets. You also got the Mist Energy in here as well. Mist Energy is very important because, you know, this Noivern attack, Covert Flight, it blocks damage, but it doesn't block effects. And so by having Mist Energy in here, you're able to deny your opponent's Roaring Moon from using attacks like Frenzy Gouging. This is just a very defensive deck. It's not meant to be aggressive, but sometimes the best offense is an insanely strong defense. And I think that's a quote from either Beyblade or Bakugan or something like that. But yeah, the best defense honestly could be all you need to win a match. So again, congrats to all those players in that Cornerstone Noivern testing group that all popped off. You guys nailed it. You guys crushed it. I was not expecting this deck at all. And to see so many of you guys pop off Make Day 2 is really, really impressive. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention about my future predictions for the other decks, so we'll just forget about it for now. But the Cornerstone control deck is definitely one of those like control decks that is a meta, like a, what's it called? A meta call deck. So it's hard to say if this deck is going to continue seeing success. It'll just depend on what the top meta decks are going into tournaments and at the moment. So don't expect to just pick up this deck and pop off, but it is one of those decks that, you know, if you hit the right matchups, you can really defend your way to victory. Now on to number 6. Number 6 is a deck that a lot of people will consider is going to be in the top 3 decks going into the Stellar Crown format, potentially the best deck in format. I believe it won the Champions League that just took place, like a 4,000 player regional level tournament in Japan. And we are talking about Raging Bolt EX. Many players considered Raging Bolt EX to be the best beat stick deck going into Baltimore regionals and just into the Shrouded Fable format. It's very strong, it can very consistently get set up, it can consistently knock out 2 prize level Pokemon in the actives to start that big initial prize trade, that prize race that we all know and love, the 2-2-2. It ended up getting not as high of a top placement at the Baltimore regionals, however it still did really well. So the best list we have here at Baltimore regionals was played by George Illage, getting 14th place. If you're a long neck Raikou believer, you're going to be continuing to enjoy this deck going into Stellar Crown. You're not going to have to spend much money at all upgrading your deck or buying new cards. We do have cards like Crispin, which some players are thinking about including into their list, but more importantly, the downside to this deck is it's not able to really play well into those single prize decks and take multiple prizes. And so we have the new supporter card Briar, which will be changing that. It makes your Terra type Pokemon allow them to take a bonus prize card when you attack your opponent and they have 2 prizes cards left. So a lot of Teal Mask, Ogrepon, Raging Bolt players are going to include a one-off copy of Briar going into the Stellar Crown format. The number 5 deck, a deck that I genuinely really enjoy playing. It became my favorite kind of turbo style deck over the last couple of months, and so our number 5 list is Roaring Moon EX. Roaring Moon EX also had a really strong showing at the Baltimore regionals. Here's a look at all the players that got into day 2 with my favorite dark type Pokemon as of late, and the highest placement was played by Emmett Hurley, getting 3rd place. So another really close call for Roaring Moon to take it all. You know, Roaring Moon got 2nd place at the World Championships in Honolulu, so just being so close to that finals must have been really devastating. But hey, 3rd place at a regionals, the pricing is nice, and you know, 3rd place is pretty nice. This deck, of course, does struggle against Lugia because of Mist Energy and Legacy Energy being a thing. So you do have to respect Lugia here and include at least a one-off copy of Enhanced Hammer so you can smack those energies off the board. This seems to be a very standard version of Roaring Moon EX. We got the 3 big Roaring Moons, you got the 1 tiny one, you got 2 Petrons, 4 Sadas are a must, and there's no Professor's Researches or Ionos in here, but we got 2 copies of Judge, and you of course have 1 copy of Boss, and we have the Palpad if you do end up milling your important supporters off of a Pokestop, or if you just have to sacrifice them earlier on into the game. Now, they do have 1 copy of Squawkabilly in here, which is a little adventurous. Sometimes for these one-off copies that are so important to your setup, I like to include a Hisuian Heavy Ball, but you don't necessarily need Squawkabilly every single game, so they just went for the maximum consistency of 4. Like if you look at the item count right here, this is a like max consistency version of Roaring Moon, and it makes sense that I got 3rd because you know, these consistent decks, they have to play so many games. You have to make sure you don't brick, and if you have a more streamlined deck like this, it is just really good. Notable thing here is they have 3 copies of Pokemon Catcher. Pokemon Catcher Love it or hate it, it is a card in the trading card game, and it's been here for a long time now. And I'm sure you guys have seen this instance, whether you're on the receiving end or you're on the end delivering it to somebody, where Sada is played, you get that built up board state, and then you hit the Pokemon catcher heads, and you get cooked, or you do cook. I've personally been on the receiving end where my opponent played Sada 3 turns in a row, played Pokemon catcher 3 times in a row, hit heads, and you can't do anything. They're just the main character for that day. But yeah, I love Roaring Moon EX, and it's strong. It has a typing advantage into Gardevoir. It's a little easier to play into Gardevoir EX now compared to Miraidon, because Monkey Dory is evil. Petron EX is so strong. It did allow your matchups into Stall being a much easier time, because this deck was horrible against Stall if they trapped your like Squawk or Greninja or whatever into the active, but because we have Petron EX now for Roaring Moon, it just makes the Stall matchup basically almost free if you're really fast and you don't get slow played into a tie, or you don't lose your important resources the hard way from the Snorlax player hitting them all. Number 4 is a deck that was heavily underrated going into the Baltimore Regionals. So underrated that it actually won the full event. That's right, we're talking about Gardevoir EX. And now, usually, I'm a anti-Gardevoir player, but after looking at this list you're looking at right now, played by Henry Chow, I have a newfound respect for these Turbo Gardevoir players. Yeah, that's right, Turbo Gardevoir. It's about setting up that Guardy as quick as you can. You got those rare candies in the list. They're not about trying to disrupt you and annoy you with unfair stamp. They're going at you hard. They're trying to get that rare candy off. They got the secret box technology, a spec in this deck to help them set up even quicker, really play the game, and be an aggressive Gardevoir deck. It's really refreshing to see. Gardevoir is not dead. Gardevoir never dies. Also, if you did play Gardevoir at the Baltimore Regionals, you are a brave soul, because so many of the big reasons why a lot of people weren't playing Gardevoir was because they were scared of Regidrago VSTAR, the Kyurem attacks. Dragapult EX is also a really annoying thing too. So Gardevoir players did convert really well at Baltimore Regionals, because if you were playing it, you were probably very confident in the deck with the way it runs. You probably had this feeling that you could just, you know what, even if the matchups are ever unfavored, you're just gonna outskill them and outplay them. So here's a look at the other players that made day 2 with Gardevoir EX. The most notable name that I can recognize here, other than Henry Chow from winning regionals, is Adam Calamat, and he's another major top player here in the Toronto region. He was rank 1 in Canada for a majority of the start of last season. Number 3 list, we got the fan favorite Pokemon, Charizard EX. Here's a look at the players that made day 2 with Charizard EX. Now, although it didn't have a strong showing in Top Cut, none of them made top 8, none of them made top 16, none of them made top 32. Boy, does that feel good to say. 0 Charizards in top 32. Heck yeah. Jokes aside though, I really don't hate Charizard players that much. I actually have a good time playing into them with my versions of Miraidon that I play. And online lately, it's been pretty crazy, but a lot of the times these Charizard decks are hardly setting up. It's actually pretty funny. But anyways, here's a look at the highest placing Charizard EX list, getting 39th place at the Baltimore Regionals, played by Owen Rhodes. He got the Entei as a big standout card in this list. There's also no Rotom V in here, but we do of course have some Cleffa technology as well. They do only have 2 Charizards EX, so I think that's a little spicy, but I think they were able to switch in the Entei into the list here, so that's why they're going with the 2 Charizards instead of the typical 3. And of course, since Owen did decide to play the Entei, that's one more additional target that you have instead of Lumineon for the Seal Stone, and of course you're not putting Rotom on your board, so you can't use Seal Stone on Rotom, so being able to put the Seal Stone on your 230 HP Entei is quite strong. A lot of decks can't necessarily hit 230 super easily, and of course if you combine that with Defiance Band as well, if there's a full board you're able to swing for 250 if Defiance Band is active. Now it does look like Owen was very aware of the potential Snorlax players coming at them soon, so they had 2 copies of Professor Turo's scenario as well. Now I do believe Charizard Pidgeot is going to still be in a really strong place in the Stellar Crown format, so if you do have your Charizard deck running around or collecting dust, don't pack it up too quick because you'll still be able to play it. I think it's going to be considered in like the top 3 to top 5 decks at a minimum, especially with the Dusk Noir line. A lot of people are starting to pick it up with the Duskull Dusk Noir engine, and so that's really annoying as well. Second best deck in the current meta for the month of September, we got Regidrago VSTAR. A lot of people had this deck at number 1 going into the regionals, just like people had it at number 1 going into Worlds. And you know, not much has changed for this deck. If anything, it just got slightly more refined. Maybe more and more people had to respect the mirror matchup, so they're putting in cards like the Lugia VSTAR for the mirror match. Here's a look at all of the players that made day 2 with Regidrago VSTAR at the Baltimore Regionals. Regidrago VSTAR just continues to be a very strong, consistent deck that a lot of top players are willing to play. The highest placing placement at the Baltimore Regionals was Rowan Stavino, getting 7th place. We're going to be looking at his list in just a second. We also got Ian Robb in 8th place, and then you have some other big players here too, like Vance Kelly, our former world champion, in 41st. We got Luke Morsa, I believe Celios Network, a fellow YouTuber as well. Jake Santiago in here too. Kamal Crooks, I believe former Yu-Gi-Oh pro, and you got Michael Davidson in here too, a rookie rising star in the Masters division now. Here's your look at the Regidrago VSTAR that was played by Rowan Stavino. I think the big notable inclusions for his list was, instead of opting for the double Dragapult EX that a lot of players seem to, you know, be opting for, Rowan did choose to go for the 1 copy of Lugia VSTAR here. He also has the 1 copy of Hawlucha for some extra spread damage, so that Dragapult EX can, you know, clean up the kills a little easier. And Rowan also opted for the Radzard as well, which is a pretty popular Radiant Pokemon for this list. I think any deck where you're able to, you know, copy attacks of other Pokemon, those decks are going to be quite strong in any meta, especially if you have like such a broad range of attackers like Dragapult EX, Giratina VSTAR, Lugia VSTAR, Kyurem. All the attacks that these Pokemon have are very, very strong in very different scenarios. Sometimes it can be bricky, but you know, in a 2 out of 3 setting, all you need is to win 2 games or 1 big game and then tie and drag out the second long one. On to the number 1 best deck in format for the month of September. A surprising one for me to see it do so well, especially as, you know, as a Miraidon player, but it is Lugia VSTAR, and this is also the deck that the number 1 ranked cheater in the world, Eder Darilio Seto, also played at the Baltimore Regionals, yoinking some money from people. He got 26th place at the Baltimore Regionals with this deck. If you don't know, Eder is a known cheater, caught on stream multiple times cheating, and is still not banned from the Pokemon circuit, which is really, really annoying. And the lack of competitive integrity in the Pokemon competitive scene, allowing a known cheater like him to play and, you know, take these money spots, is really, really frustrating to see. Just seeing their name in a you know, money winning position as well is really annoying. Now, the really funny thing here about Lugia VSTAR being the number 1 deck is that a lot of the big Miraidon enthusiasts, they switched to Lugia for this event. Jesse Parker went like 0-3 at Baltimore. I think he lost his last round to Iron Thorns. And then you also have JW Krewald, the last year's Toronto regional winner, also switching to Lugia for this event too. So here's your look at all the top players that made day 2 at the Baltimore Regionals with Lugia VSTAR. The most notable 2 for me would have to be Kieran Farah, one of our locals here in the Toronto scene. So congratulations to Kieran. You guys should also check out the Shift Gear podcast and Kieran's channel. I'll leave it linked down below. Kieran got 2nd, and in 4th we had Steven V, and then in 5th we had another one of my Pokemon homies, Rahul Reddy, who we're also going to show you guys his list too, because his list is really good into the Lugia mirror match. So here's a real quick look at the best way to play Lugia VSTAR. This is Kieran Farah's list. It looks really, really standard, max consistency from what I remember hearing about in videos and stuff like that. That's just his main goal for this build, just maximum consistency. Play as many games as you can, set up as much as you can, get those Archeops in the discard, and pop off. And then in terms of Rahul's list, which is a Lugia deck that respects the Lugia mirror match, it features a Raikou in here, along with a Lightning Energy too. So really spicy list from Rahul. He rocked the exact same 60 that he got 9th place at the World Championships with, this time getting 5th, and he might just full send Louisville with the same list once again. Click here to watch a really fun Japan Pokemon vlog. Click here to watch some Pokemon regional or national tournament vlogs, and you can click here to see the Baltimore vlog when it's up. Road to 50K. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.